This is my router table. I got this router table about 8 years ago and I've used it to make a lot of fantastic projects, but it has a couple of problems. Every time I need to change a bit, I gotta pop out this plastic ring, reach under the table to release the router, and then raise it up so I can get a wrench in from the top. Then I've got to reach around to the back to get a wrench in from the bottom. It's just kind of a slow and awkward process. Now the work area on the table is kind of small. It's 27 inches wide and 18 inches deep. And that's perfectly fine if you're working on small projects. Most of what I do is freehand routing where the bit has a bearing on it and you're running your workpiece up against the bearing instead of the fence. And when you're doing that, a large work surface is really important. Big pieces might tip off the edge, causing small blemishes in your work, or worse, your fingers. But most importantly, the dust collection is absolutely horrible. The only dust port that came with the router is the one on the fence, and I never used the fence. Now this router has an optional dust collection attachment that you can attach to the router itself, and I bought one of those to see how that would work. And well, it didn't work really well because it was really difficult to get a hose on that dust collection fitting. I ended up trying all types of adapters and angles and bends. I even tried going down to a smaller hose, but all the airflow restriction that caused basically meant that this thing just wasn't gonna suck up any dust. Now when you mount this Bosch router in this Bosch router table, you can take this key that comes with the router and you can actually make fine adjustments from above the table, but you still have to reach under the table to release the router in order to do that. All of this was killing my productivity, so I realized that it was time for a change. So I ordered a router lift, and it was supposed to be the solution to all of my problems, but it sent me down this huge rabbit hole. And I'm gonna show you that after I take a moment to thank this video's sponsor, Skillshare.
Skillshare is ad-free and they launch new premium classes each week, so there's always something new to discover. So check the video description for a link to Skillshare. The first 1,000 people to use the link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Before I build anything, I always sit down with SketchUp and try to lay out some plans. SketchUp is a powerful program, but it's got a very steep learning curve. That is why I joined Skillshare. I've been working my way through various SketchUp courses so that I can improve my plans and offer those plans to my viewers. Bob Holworth has an excellent video titled 3D Modeling Furniture with SketchUp. I watched that video before I started on this project, and if you want to learn how to use SketchUp, then I recommend that you click on the link in the description. The first 1,000 people to use the link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare.
Now the router lift is actually a pretty simple device. It's basically nothing more than a clamp that you clamp the router into, and that clamp rides on this carriage. And the most important part is that you can unlock this thing from the top of the router table and then raise it up and down to get the exact height that you need quickly and easily. You're not going to kill time reaching under the table to try to set it all up. The plate that the lift mounts on is going to sit flush with the table, and that's cool because you can make the table any size that you want. The downside is you have to either buy or build a table. The basic design of the table is going to have a 2x4 frame with 2x4 legs. I always make my tables extra tall. I'm 6'4", and I find that hunching over short tables all day long is kind of painful. And that's one of the beauties of making your own tables. You can customize them for yourself. This table is going to have a melamine top. It's going to be 48 inches wide by 30 inches deep. Why 4 feet? Well, because melamine's 4 feet wide. So all you have to do is have Home Depot cut a 30-inch strip off and you're ready to go. For the build, I'm going to start by cutting my 2x4s to length over on the miter saw. One of the key features of this miter saw is it has stop blocks, and those stop blocks allow me to measure once, set the stop block, and then I can quickly and accurately make repeated cuts. From there, I'm going to move over to the table saw. I'm actually going to take these 2x4s that are 3.5 inches wide, and I'm going to trim them down to 3 inches. I'm going to hold all the frame parts together with pocket screws and wood glue. Before I drill out the pocket holes, I like to go through and label all the pieces and mark roughly where the pocket holes need to go. The idea here is that when I start drilling the pocket screws, I want it to be a complete mindless process, no thought required, and when you do it this way, you can bust out pocket holes pretty quick. That extra planning also makes sure that you can orient the pocket holes in the correct direction to make sure that they're all going to be hidden later on when you finish the project. I have found that when I try to screw the pieces together with these pocket hole screws, the pieces tend to shift on me during that process. For that reason, I find it really valuable to clamp everything down. I'm assembling two identical frames. These frames have two cross members going down the middle. Those are mostly unnecessary, but since I'm using melamine, I want these for the extra support. Melamine's not exactly the stiffest and strongest material, and it's gonna sag over time. And while I'm drilling out all these pocket hole screws and putting everything together, I want to say thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon, with a special shout out to my $25 patrons, Dylan, Bo, and Baba. Before I screw on the melamine top, there's one more important step. I need to actually make the cutout for the Rout-R-Lift. You know, earlier I said that led me down a bit of a rabbit hole. Well, here is where the rabbit hole really started getting deep. In order to use this Rout-R-Lift, you need to mount it inside of a router table. In order to mount it inside of a router table, you have to cut a hole with a lip in the router table. Well, how are you gonna do that? If you're really good with measuring and marking and very confident in your ability to do that kind of thing, then you can probably cut it out with a jigsaw and route out the lip that the lift sits on. But if you're not that confident in your ability to do that, you've only got one choice, and that is to buy one of these things right here. This extremely expensive piece of MDF is a template that is used with this Rout-R-Lift. The idea is you just simply stick the template down to the router table and then, using a guide bushing, route out the hole. I don't know about you, but I didn't have any guide bushings on hand, so I had to order a set of these guide bushings. So, rabbit hole. Then when I went to route out that lip, I realized that I didn't have a 1/2-inch straight bit that was long enough to do it, so I had to go out and buy a bit just so I could use these bushings, just so I could use this template, just so I could route out this lip for this lift to sit on. And that's the point where I started to wonder if it would have been cheaper to have just bought a table with the recess already cut in it. But hey, this is a DIYer channel, which means I should try to do as much of the work myself as possible. I mean, I could go buy kitchen cabinets from IKEA, but where's the fun in that? Oh, and hey, make sure you set this up on a piece of scrap and make a test cut before you go cutting into your $40 piece of melamine. I learned a couple of really important things on the test cut. The first thing that I learned was I need to go just a smidge deeper than the height of the plate that this lift is mounted on. If you don't do that, you run the risk of this plate sitting above your table. And if you're doing that, you're gonna have to go back and put this stupid template back on and make that cut again. The other thing that I learned is that the overhang, the lip itself, needs to be a little bit bigger than a 1/2 inch in order for this lift to have some good proper support. That's easy. After you've gone around the edge of the template, you just freehand the router a little bit to cut a little bit more space. You trim away the middle with a jigsaw and you're off and running. To install the melamine, I'm actually going to put this thing on my work table. I'm gonna flip it upside down and screw it down from the bottom side. And with plenty of pocket holes, this piece of melamine is gonna sit right there, no problems, it's not going anywhere. For the bottom, I'm gonna be doing something very similar. I'm gonna take another piece of melamine, I'm gonna cut out some notches for the legs and screw that in from the bottom as well. I'm gonna take some of these casters here that I ordered off of Amazon, and I'm going to bolt them to the bottom. I love to get as much of my shop furniture on wheels as possible, and one of the big issues I was having with this router was, of course, dust collection. If I could have gotten the dust collection worked out, I probably would have never moved on from this lift. So I need to install some dust collection. As part of some other shop upgrades that I'm doing, I went to Harbor Freight and grabbed one of their dust collectors. And so now I need a way to get this big 4-inch hose that comes with this dust collector and connect it to this Rout-R-Lift. And to do that, I'm gonna build a dust box underneath it. It's just a box, it's pretty straightforward. My original plans called for some fancy angles, and then I realized it wasn't worth the trouble. So I just grabbed some plywood and cut down the pieces and made a very simple box. Inside the box, I put in some angled pieces to help kind of shuffle that dust into the dust port. For the dust port, I just grabbed one of the dust ports and outlined the interior of it, cut it off with a jigsaw. And since the cut was so horribly sloppy, I had to grab a file and smooth it out a little bit. This doesn't have to be perfect or precise. Then it's just a matter of connecting to the dust collector and installing a blast gate. Now, those of you who are really big into dust collection, you know that every time you add a bend or a connector or anything like that to your dust collection system, you cut down on the efficiency. But I just went from a little shop vac and a 1/4-inch hose to this 2 horsepower dust collector. So I am way ahead of where I was before, and the dust collection is absolutely amazing. It doesn't get 100% of the dust, but it gets the overwhelming majority of the dust. You can see it right here in this shot. Most of the dust is heading right down into the dust box, out into the dust collector, and not in the air and not all over all of my stuff. One problem solved. How about the other problem? What about ease of use? Well, this thing is absolutely brilliant. Before I filmed this video, back when I was thinking about trying to upgrade this router table just for kicks, I did some quick filming on the time it would take to swap out a bit. And so I laid out all the tools that I needed, ran over to the wall to unplug the router, ran back, removed and installed a bit, ran out, plugged it back in, and came over to the router table. And with all the tools laid out and me just really hustling and trying to go fast, that was about a 1.5 minute process. Well, now it's even quicker. Everything is done right from the tabletop, and that alone has made this really big, overblown, and honestly far too expensive project probably worth every dime. One of the very first videos I ever posted on my channel was a router safety video, and this router right here comes with this little doodad right here. This is what's known as a starting pin. And something as simple as this little pin right here dramatically increases the safety of your router. Between that and the good solid push blocks that I've already got, I should be good for some nice safe routing. Well, we've got that all done, but we're not finished yet because there's a problem. Like I said before, rabbit hole. The switch for the router is now inside of the box, which means you can't turn the router on and off. There's an easy solution. It's called spending even more money. It's just a switch that screws onto your workbench and then plugs into your router. You turn the router itself on, leave it inside the dust box, and when you're ready to start it, you just hit that start button. It didn't turn on because I had it unplugged for safety while I was filming. And of course, it's got this giant stop paddle on it that's easy to see and shut off the router. You can even hit it with your knee or something. If you'd like to see how I built this really cool miter saw table that I was using earlier in the video, click right here. For some awesome DIY audio guy content, click right over here. I'm Justin. I'll see you on the next adventure.